Om nahi jnanena sadrishyam pavitram miha vidyate tatsvayam yoga samsiddha kalenatmani vindati. Om shanti shanti shanti. Verily, knowledge is a supreme purifier in all the worlds. Those who are perfected in yoga realize this fact in due time. Om, peace, peace, peace. May Brahman protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om, peace, peace, peace. Peace be unto us, peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. Welcome to our Saturday Satsang again, as another week has ticked by. And while you're thinking of questions, and you can jump right in to make this a lively discussion, I'll think of something to say to you about how important spiritual life is, how we keep our minds focused upon that non-dual Brahman, and thereby take it off of body and senses, objects. And eventually, as I was reading in the Annapurna Upanishad yesterday, which I'll be sharing with all of you at the retreat at Windward Waters in a few weekends here, over Memorial Day weekend, that we also have to destroy this mind. That teaching is rather abrupt and radical for people who aren't very well versed yet in the teachings of Advaita or non-duality, because destroy and kill and so forth. Well, if you found out that everything's non-originated, then it wouldn't freak you out so badly when you heard that as a participant in this daily life in the world, in the Burloka here. Because basically, as my teacher used to say, science thinks maybe now that matter is indestructible, but it's neither indestructible nor is it destructible. It's unoriginated. So he was pointing us already to the teachings of Gaudapada and that line of non-dualists who realized that if you look for a beginning, middle, and end to everything, you're just looking in Maya with the mind in Maya, and you'll never come to any pat conclusion, certainly not one that frees you from body, senses, objects, and eventually even mind, as you make that go away. But when all of those four factors go away, which are a good portion of the cosmic principles that nature has produced with the mind, with the mind's help, make all of those dissolve, and you find out that there's something that you didn't see before looking on. We could call that witness consciousness, or the Atman, the divine presence behind everything. And it's even behind the tiniest particles of the physical universe. It's atmic, not atomic. And so when that comes forward, and it only will when you succeed in any given day and time, or any given minute or hour of meditation, then you'll notice that onlooker, and you'll begin to identify that as your true self. And you'll have to, as they say, open your inner eye of wisdom. The Jnana Chakshu is called in at least one religious tradition, but I found it mentioned in 7 different religious traditions, this white dove ascending, this third eye. And so when that opens, then you have successfully courted and reached illumination, and stages of realization will then begin to dawn upon you. And in that way, then everything leading up to it will be taken up and in would be a good way of saying it, because all the kingdoms of heaven are within. And you'll begin to see that name and form are a gift of nature, and maybe a dubious gift if you're attached to them. And that time and space are a gift of your mind. So the mind in nature is always dreaming up these dreams of life and death and birth and rebirth. Sometimes people don't account for all four of those. They just account for birth, life, and death. And they think that there's nothing beyond death. But the rebirth, that sort of proves that there is something beyond death. And maybe the soul is unborn and undying, or as that nice word I just used, unoriginated. It has no origin. If you can't find an origin to it, then it's got to be everlasting, doesn't it? And if it's everlasting, then it's eternal. And if it's eternal, then you know that you should, as the seers are telling you, put your mind on the infinite. So the way the Upanishad teaches that I'll be teaching in a couple of weeks at Windward Waters, is that do not allow yourself to get finitized. Now I know where my teacher got that, when he would always sometimes start out his lectures and say, you are divine, you are infinite, you are not finite. So the Upanishads had been, of course, teaching this for many, many of those cycles of time in that space had nested in, and that you had been nested in the both of them without knowing that you had produced them. So as Swamiji was later to put it, you are not in nature, nature is in you. And so that's where we would part company with the evolutionary theory and the 7-day creation theory and others, which if they're used metaphorically, they can be useful. And maybe at one time were, but now it's time to heed this new God of India called Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, and everything that's come out of him at the Ramakrishna order with Swamiji at its head since then, in such a short time, bringing forth not only the teachings of scriptures, but this precious strand of non-dual realization that had been Mother's hidden thread in the garment. That Sutradhara, she's called. She holds the sutra. That the sutra, it could be something that you're stitching. And so the meaning of that is that there's this hidden strand running through all the scriptures and all the teachings that she is most attached to. She loves that the most, and she likes it because it's going to destroy ignorance once and for all times. So many of you maybe saw the God blog, which we'll be talking about in a couple hours here, the kite of my mind. And so how that you walk out the door every day and you don't have a sailboat down in the harbor, you see. You're not that rich yet, not that illumined. So, but you do have a kite that you can put up in the air because you think it's a windless day, and you wanted to fly your kite. So you put it up there anyway, and just 20 feet up there's a breeze blowing you didn't feel and didn't know about. And that's the wind of God's grace. That's the Brahmanic breeze. And so the souls I was just chanting about, Tatsvayam Yoga Samsiddha, those who are perfected in yoga, they go out the door every morning saying, where is that Brahman? Or just try and hide from me today. I dare you. And so they're taking an exactly opposite tact of those who are walking out the door moping, you see, brooding, suffering unnecessarily. Why cry tears of suffering on your own divine feet, the Avadhut says. Why are you doing that when everything has come out of you and you can take it back anytime you want? And you can also project it and sport in it without attachment. There's got so many options there, but there you are, pissing and moaning, as my oldest brother used to say about people who were always complaining. So in that way, I start things rowing on a rather non-dual flavor this morning. And now I'm waiting for you to participate and jump in with some questions, because I have been accenting that lately. Yeah, before you come to satsang, have a few things that you want to talk about already. And before you come to God blogs, oh yeah, you might want to read them first if you're going to talk about them. So encourage you always to be doing this. Who can contribute first to this merry gathering? And don't be shy. Yes, Chris. Thank you. And you'll have to unmute. Yeah.
Namaste, Babaji. Namaste, everyone.
Very good.
Yeah, I have a question. It kind of is tying in with the end of your intro there. And it's wondering if you could speak a little bit more about neti-neti, more precisely, how to practice neti-neti with an intellectual knowledge or a subtle feeling that everything is full. And if I could read a couple quotes from the gospel, I think Sri Ramakrishna is kind of addressing this and maybe answering it a little bit too, but I'd like to hear you speak on it. This is when M asks, is the world unreal? And Ramakrishna answers, why should it be unreal? What you are asking is a matter of philosophical discussion. In the beginning, when a man reasons following the Vedantic method of not this, he realizes that Brahman is not the living beings, not the universe, not the 24 cosmic principles. All these things become like dreams to him. Then comes the affirmation of what has been denied, and he feels that God himself has become the universe and all living beings. Suppose you are climbing to the roof by the one God to say a man sees a thing in one way through reasoning and in an altogether different way when God himself shows it to him. And sorry if my connection cut out there.
Yeah, we were getting some really nice altercations on your voice there. At least I was on this end. But I think I understand your question and the state you're coming from. And it all has to do with states of consciousness. Like the master said, if you're really searching for the truth and Maya is in the way in all its forms, not just nature that maybe you've become dissatisfied with or suffering under, like diseases and various things, but people that in societies who are doing things that you wouldn't approve of because they're not following dharmic rules. There's a whole gamut of things, of course, that torture us and cause us to potential suffering that we can't, in the collective mind, we really can't do much about. We can only go into our individual mind and purify that, and then transcend it all to go to the cosmic mind. So the collective mind is a cross section of billions of souls at many different levels of consciousness in many different lokas and worlds that are keeping this projection going. Holy Mother said that. Desires keep this projection going, desires of the mind. So then one looks to cease or satisfy or stamp out or fulfill with the Dharma. There's some 9 different ways in which you can try to satisfy desire. You can look in the Footfalls book and find that chart. It's a good one. 3 of them don't work, and the other, the other 2, the middle 2 are sometimes, depending on the orientation, operable. And then there are a couple of supreme ones they recommend, like asamvedana, to make yourself invisible to desire. So back to the perspective under which one takes up this neti-neti practice, not this, then that's going to happen to a person at a certain stage who is definitely beyond the common run of people who are satisfied in nature and are just trying to roll with the punches of collective humanity and the world and war and all that. But that same person who's practicing neti-neti has not reached full illumination yet of iti-iti, which the seers are living in which they can say all is Brahman, because that man cannot say that yet. He cannot say it from the standpoint of Maya all around him, because all he sees is Maya. He cannot say it yet from the standpoint of not this, because he hasn't detached himself thoroughly from that Maya. Again, back to the Annapurna Upanishad, those of you who are coming on retreat in a couple of weeks, just wonderful. I've got a new chart about it that talks about these fantastic facets, these illuminating slokas that just by hearing them take you to a high state of mind. It's like the most effortless way to get to higher mind that there is if you plug into it and make use of it. And they're talking about that very self same thing in terms of Jivan Mukta, how to gain a living liberated state, and how to, as I was saying earlier, take this mind and destroy it. So if we were to define destroy, it means thoughts and concepts projected out of desire for something. This is why the seers can enter the projection and not get caught in it, because they don't have anything to gain here, because they know there's nothing to gain here. There's two ways of saying that. Nothing to gain here, because it's all empty, because you're practicing neti-neti and you found out that all of this was insubstantial or empty, that only Brahman was real. But by the time you got to only Brahman is real, you're seeing that as your very self, that thou art, aham brahmasmi. So some subtle strands of the curtain of nescience have been dissolved. And now your third eye is open, as we were just saying earlier. And with that third eye, you're seeing all as it truly is. Even objects become Brahman, they say, in that Upanishad and other places. Where before I was not seeing them as anything, because I was trying to possess them, which is really silly, because they came out of you. They're yours anyway. So you need to move amongst the objects of the senses without getting attached to them. That's how yoga would put it, Patanjali in his sutras. And so the masterful soul, those perfected in yoga, as we were just chanting, Tat Svayam Yoga Samsiddhaha, Siddha is perfection in yoga. They can move amongst all the worlds, not just this world, but other worlds too, without glomming on, without selfish grasping, because they know that those things have come out of them, number one, and number two, that those things are projections, so they don't have any substance to them. So where's the projector would be the first question for a wiser person. What's making the show go on, and where's the on and off switch? Because I can wait for nightfall and have the cosmic finger turn off the light switch, and I'm going to deep sleep and come out and somebody turns it back on, but I never know that very finger is mine. And I should know, because then I would be in control. The first thing yoga wants you to in control of is your prana, your ability to will things. And you and I were just talking about that yesterday in an email exchange, that if you're not having success in getting into dreams that you like, then change the dreamscape. It's nobody else's dream state than yours. So why shouldn't you become aware in the waking state, as the rishis tell you, and then go into dreams and dream as you will? Swamiji said that. He said, just dream dreams of higher and higher. Dream higher and higher until you awaken completely. No need to suffer in dreams. And then deep sleep will become yours too. You'll be able to move about that garden of seeds, I often call it, in deep sleep, and water the ones you want and don't water the ones you shouldn't. And then come back into a waking state and see what a great transformation has been made. Then you've got Sri Ramakrishna's story about, now I'm seeing the 24 cosmic principles have all Brahman. You see, they're all Brahman's doing. And Brahman is expressing itself through that. So nature belongs to Brahman, to that. And the false projection belongs to my mind and Maya. Krishna puts that nicely. He says, all things happen to you that come from Prakriti, but you're the Purusha. So you're actionless, so things don't happen in Purusha. there's a whole set of like 10 slokas in a row in the Annapurna Upanishads is talking about the mind that's no mind, and what we would be calling no mind, and how it's free of conceptions. And it's just concentrating on the pristine, stable, singular, unmanifested side of its nature, you know, and takes its mind off the projecting power. And if it does project, it would be for the benefit of others. That's called loka sangraha in the Gita by Sri Krishna. That you're doing your selfless service, your karma yoga, even is all done for the sake of others. And some people can try that and become somewhat successful at it. But those people who absolutely succeed in it, then it becomes a fact of existence. There's just one self everywhere, not many selves. Myself is not different from those selves. So serving those beings, I'm serving myself, and vice versa. So anyway, those are some of the secrets of non-duality in action. But then you've got these great non-dual truths in inaction. And that's one of the harder things to understand about Sri Krishna's statement in the Gita. Those who see action in inaction and inaction in action, they truly see. So one has to take apart a Vedantic koan like that and think about it and contemplate it. So that's a higher use of this mind. That's not just conceptualization for pleasure or for fun. We've not come to this earth to have fun, Holy Mother said. We've come here because we realize how fortunate we are to have a human birth, because through a human birth we can get enlightened and never have to be born again. She said once to a man who was complaining about things, he said, "Oh, you don't like it here? Well, then you can come with me." So how would you like to have the Divine Mother in front of you saying that to you? I'm on board right now. What's the admission price? Well, your head. Give me your head. Why do you think Polly cuts it off? Because that's the problem. It's a whole problem is the mind. You can talk about the glories of the mind, its creative powers, it's this and it's that, but until you can shut it off and tell it to shut up, make it stop vibrating, then you can't get formlessness. You can't get kaivalya. You can't get samadhi. You can't get satori. It's not going to be possible with the mind vibrating as it does. So again, yoga controls the prana first and then get to the mind through the prana. We've been teaching that a lot. You just said that you looked back on that mantra series and saw that. So there's another series there that has to do with connecting the living prana with the mind. We went through that for about 4 weeks in a beautiful chart. So first we have to become aware that there is such a thing as prana in this world, in this culture. And then we can go after it by signs that it's exuding. And then we can stop it from spikes upward and valleys downward, spikes and valleys all the time as your energy under the control of tamas and rajas. So with sattva balance, you can get a hold of that prana and make it flow inward and uncover the wonders of the mind and use them to gain realization in this lifetime. So neti-neti, iti-iti, I would say important to Swamiji, but not so important to Sri Ramakrishna. He knew about it, and if people ask about it, he would talk about it. But he was beyond neti-neti and probably even beyond iti-iti. He didn't have to say all this. He was that himself. He was the walking, literally God on two legs, as Vivekananda called him. So it's an important practice for those who are taking up the austerity or the pathway of knowledge and wisdom. In order to get rid of ignorance, it's not going away any other way. Oh, I tried dancing and singing. I still feel ignorant. Tried meditating. It wouldn't go away. I tried serving people. Well, that helped for a while. But Swamiji says the quickest way to get rid of ignorance would be wisdom. And that's why I just chanted at the beginning of the satsang from Sri Krishna, who's supposed to be the God of love. Nahi gyanena sadrishyam pavidrahi havidyate. So nahi gyanena, that's that highest jnanam that gets rid of ignorance. And Swami Vivekananda called that the swift stroke. That's the swift, in one lifetime you can get to realization of your true nature by taking up that path in the right way. So things like neti-neti, or dissolving the mind stream, shine, we talked about that recently in the seminar. These are ways in which you can just really intensify and focus all that energy right there. Like when Tatapari took a piece of glass and pushed it into Sri Ramakrishna's third eye and said, concentrate there. And Sri Ramakrishna saw all the worlds of name and form, time and space, just, he looked inside and they all just dissolved. It's like in one big implosion. And he was then in Nirvikalpa Samadhi for days. So this is how to intensify and bring everything to a point, a fine point, and penetrate through all these levels of ignorance, whether it be your individual and whether it be collective that you want to go beyond, or whether it be the cosmic, because you've had your bath and you're clean. Why get into the water anymore? It's dirty. Wrinkled skin happens in a bath. That means old age. That's what happens in old age. You get wrinkled skin. So get out of the bath when you're clean. Be free. Who else can share from their readings, their studies, their meditations?
Namaste, Babaji. Namaste, Ma.
Yes. Namaste, Imre. Good to see you this week.
Thank you very much, because this introduction was very, very intensive and strong. And could you clarify a little bit about this relationship between the prana and the mind, and how it should be brought through, and also again this Totapuri. So the event of Ramakrishna with Totapuri is very, very important. Also from a philosophical point of view, or vocabulary and considerations of the West. And I would like to understand it to well, of course, I know it's an intellectual kind of endeavor, in order to be able to articulate it well, since the vocabulary, I suppose, is important to be arranged. And nevertheless, I do understand and intuit that the experience, of course, is the most important point, but it's an intellectual endeavor, as I mentioned. So could you bring a bit more light on the relationship of the prana and the mind, and how this, as you mentioned in the story of Totapuris and Ramakrishna, that these inner words just bursted or just disappeared, and can we say that these inner words are based on prana and mind, and then these are kind of assumptions or accumulated, and this kind of accumulation disappears? Could it be an approach, a valid approach?
Yes, formlessness, of course, being the ultimate plane to reach, or beyond planes. It's contradictory to try and talk about it, but it's just like looking out in space here. I mean, it should prove to you that space is infinite, that everything's infinite. And down here on Earth, evolution is taking place more because you see the changing of days, sun and moon, in days and nights. You're in waking and you're deep sleeping. But up there in the universe, nothing's changing. Even in the physical universe, nothing's changing. It's just infinite and sitting there forever. And that would be much more true of inner planes, out of which the outer planes came from. Purnamadaha, Purnamidam, Purnamadachate, as the seers, the rishis said. It's all, what's outside is infinite, what's inside is infinite. The outside is finite, infinite. And it comes from the inside. But being infinite, only infinite remains, whether you're outside or inside. So they begin to look beyond the duality of external and internal and posit themselves right at the very foundation of that, and see it as a projection of the mind, the great mind. Then the collective mind gets a hold of it, which has everything to do with deities. And then the individual mind down here on Earth, which has everything to do with human ancestor loop, animals and so forth, plants. So they had a real good purview of that. And then they made a good conclusion about it, that there was something that was detached from all of that was witnessing it from age to age, and that it never changed, and it was like an all-seeing eye that never closed. And they decided they'd get into yogic insomnia and see if they could possess that eternally open eye of wisdom. And in that way, then they begin to have these experiences of samadhi and keep them, and not come out of them and go back into them all the time, which of course they could do if they were versatile enough. They could take on names and forms, like you said, an assumption. So all these worlds, if out in space, if those have come out of the mind, then how much more than you would want to see these kingdoms of heaven within. Jesus must have seen them and known them thoroughly, because he said, my Father's house has many mansions. So there's this one great house. It's so big it has mansions inside of it. And these are places of rest, places of sojourn, he continued to say. So people come into them and they do a sojourn, they do a journey for them. And they might sometimes even come to have peaceful lifetimes and rest in form, and then return to their eternal nature. It's exactly like Sri Ramakrishna saying, my most mature opinion is that everyone starts at the nitya, that's the eternal, and then they come out and down to the lila and sport, and then they return to the nitya. And he didn't make any provision in that most mature opinion for Maya, for suffering. You should be able to go back and forth between the formless and form, between the eternal and the relative, knowing yourself. I mean, that's how you're going to be able to do that, knowing yourself to be the author of all of that. If you align yourself with Brahman, then that's going to be most true to you. But if you're on your own and you don't have that refuge, you don't have that anchor, then Godspeed you, and crossing over to the farther shore beyond all darkness, because you're going to take on the darkness of the worlds when you come into them. You'll fall into the misassumption, for instance, that the sun set and it's nighttime. But out in space, there's no sunset and sunrise. And the moon is never half moon and then full moon and then gone. Everything is just as it is all the time in that land that never sleeps, where the sun and moon never rise. Mother wisdom, that loka of mother wisdom. So knowing that, they strive hardest to identify fully with the witness of all phenomena, and in that way can become one beyond all phenomena. That is, beyond, with not just the great mind, but even get beyond all tendency to engage in sankalpa or vikalpa, any kind of projection whatsoever. Because heaven stops them up, you see, when they try and get to Brahman, they stop at heaven, whether you call it heaven or whether you call it paradise or whether you call it Swarloka, whatever you want to call it. That's where people short circuit, and that's also how they get thrown back to earth. So that Krishna says in the Gita, out of a thousand beings who strive, only one comes to know me in truth. And out of thousands of those, you see, so he starts slimming it down to just a very few souls that have seen through the attractions and the allurements here. And the spiritually awakening people, as Buddha called them, those who are awakening spiritually, they're beginning to see through that. And the more that they do, then the more they feel the stoppage of time and the lack of space, the disappearance of space and the disappearance of time, and the show of Maya that is name and form, constantly going on in cycles. And that puts them in a very unique state of consciousness with which to enjoy the bliss of the self, without moving, without projecting, without coming or going. Coming and going is all nonsense, then they say, you see, because where's the time the soul will come when all of time is in the soul? Where's the space it will go to when all of space is in the soul? So time, we begin to switch it all up. All of this is here. You see, that's this mudra, right? Everything that's out here, and then you put it to your heart. You see, what is there is here. And you'll see Sri Ramakrishna doing that mudra in one of his pictures. So it's a way of saying that everything out there that you see going on in cycles and everything has really come from here. So at the end of the Annapurna Upanishad, it says, learn to dwell and abide fully in the heart. It's talked for some 100 slokas about mind, senses, prana, thoughts, projection, bondage, freedom, what Brahman is, what it's not, what's beyond what is and what's not. It takes you the whole gamut, the whole way. And finally, at the end, it just says, just learn to dwell fully in the heart. Well, that heart is the Atman. It's not an anatomical heart. It's not a sentimental heart. And it certainly isn't a heart that's possessed by people with fair faces and false hearts. It's that heart called the Atman, which is the underlying substratum of everything. And that is yours, and that is you. Both. It belongs to you. So you shouldn't let anyone take it away from you, especially in sentient things. So do not allow yourself to be finitized, it says. Just disallow it. I will not think of myself as a finite being anymore. Everyone's trying to push that on me. It's not happening anymore to me. I am the infinite. I am Brahman. And when I fall out of that one thought is when I suffer, and when I forget, and when I get reborn, when I find myself in situations like Arjuna has found himself. Maya has a lot to conjure up and dance before you, dance before your mind and senses. There's always something new, right? So you're going to have to find out what this infatuation is with the new, because there's nothing new under the sun. So you're going to have to find out what this infatuation is with things that come and go, the next new thing. I was walking through a store the other day, and there's this music going on in the background. There's some rapper or someone like that. You see, and all of a sudden I heard some of the lyrics were Putin, 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 Putin. So that's the new thing, you see. So he thinks he knows a lot about the world and how to help it. So he finds the latest new thing and he puts it in the lyrics of his song. And nothing gets said. And it's not going to end the line of Putins that are coming around the bend when this one goes away. And there you are, all sucked into it. What happened to I am Brahman? I am changeless. I am formless. What happened to all those beautiful teachings? Use this lifetime to realize them first, foremost, and for all time, beyond time. And then rest fully in the heart. That's what the heart means in Vedanta. People are always saying, oh, it's all intellectual, too much mind. It's because the mind's in the way and you're going to have to unwrap it, turn it off. It's a factory's producing toxic waste. Then you're going to have to go find the on-off switch somewhere in that huge factory. You think that's an easy thing? Trying to find that? You're going to have to explore that factory and shut it down so no more poison will be pumped out. So the universe is poison. Life is poison. The mind is poison until you learn to control it and master it. And gets back to what you were asking about, the prana. If you want to find the first sign of life, that would be prana, I would think. Not just to act, just to see, just to walk, and even just to think. It's just, they say that's a sign of life, but they don't know what's causing the signs of life. What causes the eyes to see? What causes the body to move? What causes the mind to think? That's this life force, this prana, and it happens in the external, in 5 forms in the external way, and it happens in 5 psychic pranas in the mind, and they're connected. So you find out, you get back in possession of those pranas, learn how to work them, get rid of the spikes and valleys, and let it flow. Make it flow, unimpeded. Om apyayantu mamangani vak pranishchakshu shrotramatvam all balamindriyani, all the senses, sarvani. So may our bodies experience perfect health, may our life force flow unimpeded. Then our minds will expand in their capacity to know Brahman. Whoever came to know Brahman by concentrating on the body and mind, or by brooding on it. Because there is a stage where you will concentrate on the elements of the non-self. That's neti-neti, right? So you will concentrate on the elements of the non-self to prove to yourself that they're not the self, that you're the self, and you're the self in all. And then go on, let it go. And return to the source, come home. You don't like it here, then you can come with me. Sri Ramakrishna just to sit, eyes half open, half closed, in bliss, with nothing, owning nothing, having nothing. Holy Mother once made a little mistake of giving him a little bag of spices because he liked to chew spices once in a while. Oh, here, take some of this for later. He walked out of the bedroom and into the river. He was disoriented by owning something. It put his mind completely off out of whack and out of balance to think that I had something for the future. Imagine that. That Upanishad that we'll be learning, finishing up in a couple of weeks, has said those very same things. I never think about the past. I never think about the future. I only think about the vision of now. That's a direct quote. Sounds impractical, you see, to people who are having to live in the world and make ends meet, right? But can't you hold two ideals? Can't you know what the truth is, at the same time participate in the non-truth? Be the absolute, but take stock of the relative. That's back to Krishna. Sorry, Chris, I called you Krishna. Back to Chris's question. See, that this neti-neti and this iti-iti are always working together. It's not like you can all of a sudden say, all this is Brahman, and then not find something that contradicts that the next day. That you're going to have to say again, oh, no, that's neti, that's not this, that's not Brahman, that's not what we're talking about. Because you practice neti-neti, then you always have it there on hand when Maya rears its ugly head, or when it rears its beautiful head. So you just have to disenchant yourself from the mind's powers and what it produces. Think what a huge task that is, that billions and billions of souls have projected these wonderful worlds in space and time full of horrors. And you somehow have to slough it off like a snake skin to get back to your mother, to turn it off. Well, don't worry about it never coming back again. Nothing becomes extinct. It all returns again in its next form from a seed that it lives in. So that's the least of your worries. The main thing is to get free and be able to witness it from a distance. Participate in it carefully to help others, and then withdraw yourself from it at will. That's the facility of these illumined souls. And why I started out saying just now, Sri Ramakrishna used to just sit, eyes half open, half closed, in bliss, just when he had owned nothing and had nothing. Only if he had any desire at all, it's when's Naren going to show up? That was Swami Vivekananda, right? As a young man. When's he going to show up? I really want to see him. He's the perfect man. So 5 more minutes or so. Maybe time for another sharing insight.
I had a question, but it's been largely answered throughout this whole satsang. It had to do with finding fault. The way that's put in Om Sahana, the verse. May we not find fault with the world. And what you were just saying works very well, holding 2 ideals. That detached witness consciousness, and but proceeding carefully in practical, empirical life, and keeping neti-neti in your tool bag ready to pull out as soon as you need it. But I wanted to go back to something that Imre mentioned, and forgive me if I didn't hear what you said on this specific point. It's something I can't really hear enough of, and that's this implosion of a word. And he was linking it to, if I heard him correctly, hi Imre, he was linking it to Totapuri and Sri Ramakrishna, and how with a word, there was just this big shift for Sri Ramakrishna. I think that's what he was saying. or implying. And he was linking that up to prana and mind. But in any case, if you would talk about more about this implosion of a word inside one during contemplation or meditation, I would appreciate that.
Well, that's another topic. I think what I understood when Imre was talking was because of his accent is in there in English, he was saying world, not word. So he was talking about worlds and worlds. And is that right, Imre? Yeah. So I finally got that because I was thinking too, why is he going to word? He's changing the topic, but it doesn't matter because you brought up word and its implosion. Now we can go on talking about that for another hour. Now that we only have a couple minutes left, but the way I've put that, if you want to put it, summate it very shortly, is that there are these wisdom particles, jnana matras. It's in the Sanskrit. It's very old, and people are talking so much into studying particles of matter, but particles of thought, if you take them to their finest place, are particles of intelligence or higher intelligence, and not intellect, as was just mentioned again by Imre about intellectual. The intellectual has maybe an advantage over others if they can get rid of the ego of intellect. They often can't, so you don't find them becoming devotees or having much faith. They may take a path and give it up within a few years. They have a lot of problems with the ego coming up, this intellect itself. But the intellectual, intelligent itself, intelligence is in a stream of particles, just like a beam coming from a sun. It warms, it helps to grow, and so when you gather together your thoughts, because thoughts start out scattered for most people, and then you go to try and gather them, and then they're finally gathered, but then you have to focus them. So they're like 4 states of mind, according to Swamiji. He's borrowing that from the 5 states of mind of Patanjali earlier. So like Muda and Kshipta and Vikshipta, Ekagra and Niruddha are 5 states of mind, and Swamiji describes that, so we don't have to go through the Sanskrit and look back to 120 AD about scattered, then observant, gathering and gathered mind, and fully gathered and focused. That process is a very easy way of saying bringing your particles of intelligence together and focusing them on one thing. People, it's very multivariate too, because people can do that on one subject, one apara vidya subject. That is, they can become very good at something of the secular knowledge variety. But the seers have all of a sudden said, and I know, like my teacher said, you learn to focus on music, so now just take that same focus, you focus it on Brahman now. You can do it. So he sort of stuck a piece of glass up to my third eye when I was with him, and told me to use that same power of concentration I had gotten and put it on Brahman. And he often would say that that's why sometimes artists and intellectuals could make the fastest growth if they were open-hearted about wanting to get free and see God face to face. So in that way, a person is gathering together these streams of intelligent particles. And then as Sri Ramakrishna is sitting there with his eyes open and half closed, half open, half closed, what's he doing then? It's looking inside to these gathered particles of wisdom and then thinking about them. And just like a scientist would explode an atom, the seers are exploding these particles inside their head. And what gets released is not a power for destruction, but a power for insight. So that's why they're so blissful. That's why they have these intense bliss, like Sri Ramakrishna saw him in that state quite often, or deep, deep, I'm gone and gone forever state where you think they'll never come back to the body and senses again. And by reading about them, by seeing them, by touching them, by being near them, whatever is possible, samipya, sayujya, salokya style, then you can almost taste it. You can almost smell it. You can almost see it. God and everything. Brahman underlying everything. And that's one of the facets then of gathering together your thoughts and placing on a higher trajectory and on the Supreme Brahman. So get your mind, use it like a bow, fastened to it the arrow of the scriptures, made sharp by thoughts on reality alone. Danor Grahit Vow, Upanishadam Mahastram. The great Upanishads, Upanishadam Mahastram, that's Vedanta. And it's something we have in spades, as they say. It's here upon us now in full force in this age. Swamiji has uncovered it, and Divine Mother is making sure that it's staying open and viewable. And we need to avail ourselves of that first and foremost, above everything else. Like you just said so nicely, even beyond empirical existence. Sankara, whose birthday was yesterday, by the way, said that a lot about empiricism, that's what people's lives are all about. So the best of empiricism would be the intellectual side of things. That's what's brought all the good things of this world out, is some good thinkers. But it's also, as has been said by Krishna in the Gita, basically, if knowledge is just left short of realization, it becomes dangerous. It's a very powerful statement. And but you'll see it's true when you see knowledge just settle into one place, one climb, one time, one topic, one subject, and you milk it for all that it has, which is not much because it's finite. And then all of a sudden it turns into a lot of exacerbations and problems. So in that way, we want to grab a hold of these streams of wisdom particles. That's actually what we're doing here when we gather for satsang. We're just streams ourselves of intelligent particles, and we're coming together to shine a light on that Brahman. So let's end here with that. Om Utistata Jagrata Prapya Vrani Bodhata Kshurashyadara Nishita Durajaya Durga Patastat Kavaya Vedanti. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Arise, awake, stop not till the goal is reached. Approach the wise teachers and learn from them. For sharp as a razor's edge is the spiritual path, and difficult to navigate. So say the wise. Om, peace, peace, peace. And peace be unto us, peace be unto all. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Tat Sat.